get us confused. But the Beltline Inc. is really, or ABI is what we call it, is really the implementer of the project. The Atlanta Beltline Partnership, which I don't know if Rob Bronner is going to come talk to you guys. They are our fundraisers. They do all of our volunteer programming and all of our event programming. So people sometimes get it confused, but even myself. So today I'm going to go over just a quick overview of the Beltline. I'm sure you guys kind of got a lot of it last time and probably came in with your own knowledge as well. But just a quick overview and history of the Beltline, the East Side Trail, which you guys will be the tour guides and stewards of now, and just talking about how we came to the design that we have, that you guys, has everybody been out to the trail? Okay, so we'll go over just different design elements and how we came to these decisions and where we're going with a lot that we learned from the East Side Trail. I'll briefly go over other elements, other parks that we have built, other trails that we have built, kind of explaining our relationship with the city. I've spoken with several docents who say, people have all these questions of how the city of Atlanta is involved with the project and how they're not involved. So I'll try to kind of clear that gray area up and answer any questions about where we go next. And where we're going now is the East Side Trail Extension and the West Side Trail, which I'll get into, and hopefully be able to answer any questions you guys have. So I always start with why is the Beltline important? This is kind of my mini urban planning session. Atlanta's growing. We're the 9th most populous city in the country. We're growing rapidly. People are moving back into the city. And we have not really practiced sustainable growth. Atlanta is the poster child for sprawl and has been for decades, but the Beltline is trying to change that. Traffic congestion. Atlanta is notorious for traffic, which is bad for the quality of life here, and it's also bad for economic development. A lot of people don't want to, have their headquarters here because the quality of life of the people working for them could possibly be diminished because they're sitting in a car for 2 hours every day. Insufficient park space. We have the second lowest percentage of park space among some of the largest cities in the U.S. This statistic really caught me off guard because I feel like everywhere I go, you see a little patch of grass with a park sign in it, but there's no programming to it, but it's still considered park space. But as a city, we really don't have, we have, Piedmont Park is our largest park, but outside of that, we really don't have a ton of park space within the city limits. Unbalanced economic development. This goes to kind of our sprawling issue that we've had starting around the 60s, definitely 70s and 80s. But we have really created these nodes with nothing around them. Turner Field's a poster child for that. And it's also, I made this presentation last year before Turner Field decided to move. So this is even more of an interesting unbalanced economic development center. It'll be interesting to see what happens to it. Unplanned growth, sprawl. Again, this is an aerial, this isn't of Atlanta, but it could be. We just have a ton of regional sprawl, not really within the city, but kind of. And a lot of it creates a disconnect, not only for people walking places, but biking. You get in your car and you go somewhere. We don't really have this mentality in Atlanta that, I'm going to bike to the supermarket, or I'm going to walk down the street and go get milk. You get in your car and you go down the street to get milk. So, quick history lesson. This is a rather depressing map for me. It was done in 1924, and this is the old streetcar system of Atlanta. You went all the way up to Eastlake. Decatur had a streetcar. The city limits were just above Piedmont Park at this time, but it was a pretty complicated system. A lot of these streetcar systems were privately created and built and funded. Primarily, Inman Park is a great example of this, and I always use Adair Park, which is on the Beltline. But they were created by these titans of industry in the city. George Washington Adair was one of them, and he had Adair Park, his development, and to get people to his development, he built a streetcar to it. And that's how a lot of the streetcar systems in Inman Park was the same exact way. That's how a lot of the streetcar systems in the city got built. And after the war, it started, population growth in the city was booming, and cars were, really wanting to get into this. But the streetcar stood in the way. So a lot of the car industry, tire industry, anything associated with the automobile started to buy up the streetcar and demolish it. So you would buy a car because you didn't have another option to get into work anymore. But we still find tons of streetcar rails in the city. Every time you pull up a road, there are streetcar rails, and sometimes they just leave them in there every single time. So it's kind of a cyclical archaeological dig we do. This is one of the only snippets of a map that I could find. This is Inman Park. They had a roundhouse, but this is the Beltline right here, and it's a pretty good representation of what you can still see now. You have kind of the industrial building near the roundhouse. You have a lot of the mill housing that's around the industry, and you can still see remnants of this today with cotton mill lofts and Carroll Street. And Ryan Gravel, who you guys will meet, you guys know the story of the thesis, the only man whose thesis has really, this is probably the farthest any thesis from Georgia Tech has gone, but he came up with the Beltline idea while studying in France, in graduate school, didn't think much of it. Kathy Woolard, who was a council member at the time, took the idea and ran with it, and that's where we are today. He'll get into it. He has a really great presentation about how he came up with the idea for the Beltline. So this is kind of our overview, go-to numbers slide. 22 miles of transit, 33 miles of trail. We're adding, a little over 1,000 acres of parks. One thing about this statistic, these are the statistics that a lot of the docents will say in the beginning of their tours, or at least the ones that I've been on. The parks acres, some of them are new parks, brand new parks like Fourth Ward Park. Some of them are additions onto parks or improvements to parks. Arthur Langford Park is an example, and Southwest Atlanta, Ferguson Park, a couple others in there. I would highly recommend that you study what we call the Strategic Implementation Plan. It's online. I don't know if it's really long, but there are a couple overview pages that are really helpful as far as the parks that we will cover, the timeline, and in some cases the overall cost of what these improvements will be. We're adding over 5,600 units of affordable housing, which I'll talk about later, but we have a prime example that we will walk past on our way to the Reynoldstown Trail. And we are remediating, that number is probably going to change, well over 1,000 acres of brownfields. Brownfields are contaminated lands where industry once was, which is the entire Beltline. And any parcel that touched the Beltline in most cases was industrial in some way. Public art is also an element that I'll talk about, and we involve historic preservation in pretty much everything we do. We are historically preserving this corridor, but small elements, we try to preserve as many things as we can. Sometimes it's impossible. It's a very costly thing to preserve a lot of these bridges, but overall we're trying to preserve as many of the railroad bridges and reuse them. Some of them structurally, it's sad and it breaks my heart, but we can't do it. And then you'll see on the West Side Trail, if you do a tour there or just go for a walk there, and on the East Side Trail, we have a lot of art made out of what we find, which is mostly rails and nails. I'll get into other things that we find when we talk about the East Side Trail. But historic preservation is a big part of what we do every day. So this is the easiest map of the Beltline. That one is very helpful, but this is what I like to show during presentations because the Beltline is a mini 285, and that's what it was created to be, except for it was for railroads, not for cars. Railroads were trying to get around traffic, not have to deal with the hustle and bustle of going through downtown Atlanta. They wanted to go around, and they created this ring of industry around the city while doing so. So it's connecting about 45 neighborhoods. A little over 6,000 acres are involved in the redevelopment area. Redevelopment area is all of the area in the green. 22% of the city's population live within the Atlanta Beltline planning area. And 8% of the city's land mass is inside the Atlanta Beltline TAD. Does everybody know what the TAD is? The tax allocation district is how we are funded. And it deals with, I am a landscape architect, I am not an accountant, so I'm terrible at explaining what it is. So I would suggest you look it up. We have a really great graph on our website. But it's basically how we fund most of what we do. We do have private dollars that we use. East Side Trail was built with private dollars. And we do have federal funding for some segments, which I'll get into later.
Can you just go back to that?
Yeah.
One question. 22% of the city of Atlanta population lives in the Beltline planning area. You mean lives right around that green area?
Yeah, lives in the green area.
Okay.
So in all of this shaded area, 22% of the city lives. Which I was a little skeptical of the map to begin with when I was a fellow. I thought that was a lot because you drive these areas and a lot of it's still taken up by industrial uses or a lot of archiving, warehouses where there is no one. But then you have areas, Virginia Highlands is included, Lindbergh is included, a lot of these population nodes throughout the city. And it kind of helps to balance out areas like the quarry, which, there really isn't anything.
Not a lot else.
Yeah, not a lot of housing. So the East Side Trail. This is kind of a dated schematic of how we explain the trail, but I feel like it's the easiest way to do it. So this is just a generic photo of any part of the corridor. And when I talk about the corridor, I mean the 30 or so feet where trail and transit will go. And usually it's where the railroad was and ran. There are a few cases where we are not able to get both trail and transit in the corridor. So we're having to really get creative with how we weave the trail in and out of a lot of these neighborhoods. And I'll get to that later. But this is basically what we see and what we work with. So this is over the trail. This is what you see on the East Side Trail, minus the line down the middle and the lights. We will be putting lights and cameras on every single trail throughout, and we're going to backtrack to the East Side Trail eventually with lights. Lighting is a huge expense.
When will that happen?
For the east side or
Just overall, I guess.
overall, well, the west side trail and the east side trail extension have lights programmed into the design. So those start this summer. And the east side trail, we are trying to creatively figure out how to put lights in it without disturbing the flow of traffic on the current trail, and also find funding sources for it. This is a huge, huge expense to light this amount of space adequately, but we're getting there.
And this picture shows him breaking the rules.
Oh yeah, they're totally and this is the trail with development. You know, we really see, and we have seen through the East Side Trail, people really want to connect to the trail. And a lot of the development on the east side has changed or spruced up what they look like. A great example is the shops at 10th and Monroe. There's Doggeroo, Mint Salon, Euphoria, and they've taken the backs of their buildings and painted them and turned around and put doors on the backs. When we started the trail project, they were white. That's where they put their trash. There was graffiti on the back. It was pretty gross, actually. But now it's a completely different scene, and they want people to come in from the trail, and that's where they get most of their business now, is off of the trail. So this is trail, transit, and development. What I tell people about transit, if you guys get questions, what is transit going to look like? Where's it going to go? All that, that's all easily explained, but the best way to describe transit to people that think it's MARTA is considered a heavier rail, heavier gauge transit, is to say go to the downtown streetcar. That's exactly how our system will run. That's exactly how our system is going to look for right now. The catenary lines, which are the electrical lines that will run above and charge the streetcar, make it run, we're using the same exact system as the downtown streetcar. And the streetcars for right now will look exactly the same. We're still working on that. But that is a great way to explain transit to people who think we're putting heavy rail MARTA through their trail.
And they'll actually connect to the downtown streetcar, right?
Yes. And we're working on several cross connections as well. So it's not just a circle that you keep going around. And it'll connect in a couple lateral. So this is the East Side Trail, 2.25, roughly 2.25 miles, starting at 10th and Monroe, Piedmont Park, and going to Irwin Street. This is our first in-corridor trail. People will always say, well, you've got the Weston Trail, you've got the Tanyard Creek Trail, why aren't those considered in corridor? We actually didn't build those. The Path Foundation built them, and they are considered spur trails. So this is our first real trail that is right on top of where the railroad was. It was originally designed to go all the way to Cavishtown, Reynoldstown, and end right out here on Memorial, which is where we'll walk later. But the city charged us with rebuilding the Edgewood Bridge, and we didn't want to rebuild the Edgewood Bridge while putting a trail under it. That seemed a little counterproductive. So we will be starting the East Side Trail extension. We're wrapping up design right now, and hope that construction will start late summer or early fall this year. And what a lot of people see about the trail is the trail, the trees, the native grass meadows, and the apartment buildings and the signage and this, that, and the other. There is so much more underground than most people realized. And it took us about 2 years worth of construction to build what you see. And for some people, even myself, it's kind of hard to think, well, why did this sidewalk take 2 years to build? That's ridiculous. We had to do a ton of remediation. The soils were horrible. A lot of them were severely contaminated. We had a ton of kudzu and invasives to remove, and we still have to remove them. Trees Atlanta does all of our invasive removal. We had to deal with ancient old utilities that were not on any map. We found what is kind of a perfect example of the evolution of stormwater systems. It started with wooden pipes almost, a wooden system, then it went to granite and then brick, and then it's kind of a CMU block or a concrete blocking system that we use today. This was a huge shaft that we found in excavating for the East Side Trail that we were not expecting. So these things set us back, and every time we put a shovel in the ground, we will find something we didn't expect, even though we do what's called an environmental impact statement, or an EIS statement. And that pretty much, we feel, covers, where utilities are, what, the previous uses of this land was, and hundreds of pages of this stuff, and you think everything is covered, and it's not. Just on the gateway, which connects Historic Fourth Ward Park to East Side Trail, we found an entire building under the ground. And we thought it was a wall, which isn't, totally out of the realm of possibilities. We find random, remnants of walls or foundations. People would just push dirt into stuff and leave it. The railroads could do anything they wanted. They weren't really regulated. Permitting wasn't that as big of a deal as it is today. And the EPA did not exist. So they could get away with anything. And this building we found from looking at, I think the map was from 1918 to 1920. We looked at old maps and determined it was an auto body shop. Okay, great, we'll remove it, whatever. We found an entire basement floor of this building filled with 900 tires. So we had to remove everything. And it delayed us about 3 weeks, but that's typical for us. We know we're gonna find something. We just hope it's not some kind of cemetery or, any kind of historic infrastructure. We find rails all the time. That's typical, and we actually save them over here at Stein Steel in Reynoldstown. But, we really don't know what we're going to find. But we remediate the soil, we remove anything we find, and we add in newer and better soil.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do the people who actually do the work, are they all employees, or do you hire other companies to do that type of work?
We are the implementer. So we manage, backtrack. We manage subs. So every contract that we have, we contract out to a contractor. That's for design, and that's also for construction. Paul, our CEO, is also a landscape architect. So we have a contingency of landscape architects on staff. We have two civil engineers on staff that we review all of the drawings and make sure everything's to our liking, and then we manage these projects. But we do sub out to Perkins & Will did the East Side Trail design, and Astra Group, they were the contractors for the design.
You have a archaeological survey or
Yes.
people there?
Yes.
Okay, so
We do. That's part of the EIS. And it's also, we have a very large book of protocol, what happens. We basically stop work if we find something. And then we bring in our team of engineers who, they do have an archaeological sub of some kind that comes in, evaluates, whatever we found. And then we have to report it. There's a whole list of how we report these things. Civil War or pre-Civil War rail, we find a lot of, and we have to report that. And they really just recommend you bury it back. So that's what we do. It's very strange. I don't get shit about it. But another interesting thing about the trail is stormwater drainage. For centuries, people were able to literally just put a large pipe coming off the back of their property, and all of their stormwater would just flow right on the belt line. Nobody said anything, nobody cared, until we came along and said, hey, this is illegal, and you need to figure out how to fix it. Because the erosion in a lot of these abandoned areas was just ridiculous. And so we deal with that with every trail project we have to work on. And we also have a series of duct banks, so fiber, utility fiber, running the length of every single trail. And we lease out, it's like a series of, might be up to 8, but it was 6 for the East Side Trail, of fiber ducts. So they're just large pipes where AT&T can run fiber, and we lease those things to generate income. And that's exactly what the railroads did with a lot of this area. Sprint, I never knew this, but Sprint is Southern Pacific Rail, and I don't know what the other 2 letters stand for, but it was a railroad company that started a utility. So, you had a question?
Is Perkins and Will doing all the design for the totality of the trail, or are you gonna, I guess, bid out each part of it?
What we do is, and I'll get into how we did the typologies. Perkins and Will they did the East Side Trail and East Side Trail Extension. They started with the west side and then passed the torch to one of their subs to take it over. So Kimley Horn is our lead designer for the West Side Trail. But right now we're in discussion of how to continue the design for the rest of it, because the way this has worked is Perkins and Will get us to 25%. Like, this is how the southeast portion of the trail is working. So they'll get us to 25% design. So that's just basic. This is where the trail can go. This is a transit corridor. And here's some other design elements. And then we would rebid for somebody to take that 25% to 100% and then go with us through construction. So we're kind of in discussions on how to move forward from that. But for the most part, they get us to at least 25%. So this was our conceptual render of what it would look like near the Fourth Ward Park skate park, which probably is around
Your big middle circle is.
So this
Sorry,
would be the skate park. This is the trail and the arboretum. And then this was taken just after we completed the trail. The trees weren't in yet. But it was cool to see how we can come from this, little conceptual rendering to, actually looking like what we're doing. And as a designer, this does not happen a lot of times. We made it happen in Fourth Ward Park somehow. Some of our renderings actually look almost eerily just exactly like what you see in the park, especially in the basin. But as a designer, this doesn't often happen. So it's exciting to see it. So our trail design. This is the East Side Trail typology. Typologies are, basic guidelines to what we are putting in the ground. And Perkins and Will came up with this, it's about this thick, this book of typologies of everything that we could possibly think of, every condition we think we're going to hit for trail, transit, what our signage is going to look like, what our bollards are going to look like, where to cite public art, all of these things. And we came up with this typology book so that we can do exactly what I just talked about and hand off the book to a new design team. We don't want to start from scratch every single time. And we want consistency in what the belt line looks like and what the trail looks like and the transit stations. Knowing that we will vary these things and put little cultural elements depending on what neighborhood we're in. And a lot of the ways that we do that is through our public art program. But the typologies are really to help us keep this baseline and make everything look like, oh, I'm on the belt line, not just I'm on a trail or I'm on a sidewalk. So this was our trail typology for the East Side Trail. As a designer, I realized that sometimes we think of things in the studio and think, this is a great idea, this is awesome, let's do it. And then we do it and nobody gets it. I never said this, and do not say that I said this to Ryan Gravel, but we have a two-tone system on the East Side Trail. Most people think we just forgot to finish one side, because you can't really see the difference at most times of the day, but one side is sandblasted and it's rougher. The other side is not sandblasted. And we thought, instead of putting a line down the middle, which most people associate with keep on this side, keep on that side, maybe they would use texture as a way to, say, oh, well, I'm on the rougher side. I need to, keep going this way upstream. And that has not occurred. And I'll be the first to admit that it was a decent idea in theory, but in practice, it didn't work. So we are revamping this. So on the East Side Trail extension, for right now, we're actually just having a sandblasted line in the middle. It's a pretty thick 6-inch line. I still think we should paint it. If you want to write a letter, please do so. I'm open to that, and I will take them to the CEO. But we have a lot of problems with manners on the trail. People don't know, which side to stay on. But that was a design decision that was made, and you can always point that out on your tour. We're also working on this 2-foot soft shoulder. It was originally designed to be stone dust, which is like the active oval in Piedmont Park. But stone dust is very expensive and very expensive to maintain. So we're looking into, I think we right now have about 5 different options of what to do. And we'll be coming out with a test on the East Side Trail, which I'm pretty excited about. So we'll have a sign out there. You get to run certain lengths of it and see, I like this better, I prefer this material. So we're coming to the public and saying, okay, what would you use? What do you want to see? So this does not exist, but will soon. We have a lot of spur trails. Freedom Parkway Trail is considered a spur trail. And those are made of just regular cement. And we have this granite threshold, just signifying you're coming to the Beltline.
Can you tell me what spur means?
Spur, so in a lot of areas, we're either connecting to an existing path, like the Freedom Parkway Trail, or we're connecting, to connect to a road that's pretty high traffic. We had to do just a regular sidewalk to connect to that road up to the Beltline. So that's really, it's kind of either sidewalk and or we're connecting to a trail.
What's the point of this, the trail on the far right? Is that for a running trail, or what's that for?
It's for running. As a runner myself, I don't like running on hard surfaces, and we found out before we went in with the native grass meadow that people were actually going about 6 feet off the trail, and there was this lovely little running path that I just loved. And it was dirt, and you were running, at that point there were weeds, but it was like you were running through a meadow. And we're trying to figure out a way to create that, but just 2 feet off the trail. And it also will help us with congestion. We have a lot of congestion issues when I don't even go there on a Saturday or Sunday. We'll hit about 10,000 people on a really nice weekend. That's in a day. That's crazy. We didn't even think what would be our numbers, but we have laser trail counters. In 2 or 3 places on the trail, one moves. And they're counting way more people than we ever thought. So, yep.
Is anything gonna happen with rules for bikers? Because I've seen a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, I saw a biker run into a little kid.
Yep.
And it's just pretty horrible how they think they can go as fast as they do.
Yeah, they go really fast.
They do. And people have said, we work really closely with the Atlantic Bicycle Coalition. And they've tried messaging as far as, let's let's get out, let's talk to people about, bike etiquette and manners and things like that.
I've had bikers like cursing me,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, my dog got in their way a little bit or
Mhm.
something, and
Yeah.
it's pretty.
They're very intense, and it can be very scary, especially with young kids running around.
Right.
We are starting what we're calling a charm campaign, where we have a messaging campaign with people actually standing out there with signs, like picketing signs, but in a nice way. Saying things like, please slow down. What is it? One of them is sweet peas at play. It's got a little kid on a bike. Like, please be cognizant that there are children trying to learn to ride their bikes. So we know it's an issue. We didn't realize going into this that it would be such an issue, but it's actually gotten better from when we first opened the trail and we had teams of racing bikes
Yeah.
using it, and they finally figured out this isn't a good place to do this. We'll do it somewhere else. So that was step one. Step two is just the bikers get out of my way. I've had things thrown at me before. Trees Atlanta has things thrown at them, I'm sure, on a daily basis. With the trucks.
One of the docents wears a whistle. I don't know if she's ever blown it, but she wears a whistle.
But when we know it's a problem, we've thought about, okay, put a speed limit. But a lot of people go, I don't know how fast I'm going on a bike. And usually what we call the spandex speedsters, they know exactly how fast they're going, but they're not really using the trail anymore for getting a time or, for a workout or anything like that. We have issues with people using these elliptical things that take up the entire trail. A lot of it's self-policing, and that's what I try to tell people is, if somebody's going fast, yell at them. I give you full permission to yell at them. And then somebody else will see, oh, well, they yelled at that guy to slow down, so next time I see somebody, I can yell at somebody in a nice and polite way.
Yeah.
But that's really the only way we're finding from talking to other cities about this issue that things get resolved.
I've seen some police officers on bikes out
Yes.
there too. What is their function or?
So the task force, which is located in the building across the street, they are our dedicated police force. Our police foundation got a grant to hire all former veterans to come and be a part of the Beltline police force. And they ride their bikes, they walk sometimes, but that is their one area to patrol, any Beltline trail and any Beltline park. They don't belong to a zone, that is their one job, but that's the Beltline Path Force. The equestrian police, they're, I think, zone 6, but
Can they,
So Freedom Trail's been around a lot longer.
yes.
It has a different purpose, I guess. How have the pedestrians and bicyclists shared the Freedom Trail? I've been very successful as a
Yes.
bicyclist
Yes.
myself.
No, Freedom Trail, Path Foundation was the construction manager on our project, and we work with them with everything that we do. Ed McBrayer, who's the head of Path Foundation, sits in on all of our meetings and gives us advice on how to make these successful, because he's done this for hundreds of miles around the state. Freedom Trail doesn't see as much volume as what we're seeing on the East Side Trail, and a lot of Freedom, I've commuted on Freedom before for at least 2 years, and it's a commute trail. People are coming to the Beltline either to stroll, which you see some on the Freedom Trail, but it's a lot less of a volume that we're seeing, comparing any kind of the path trails to the Beltline Trail, and it's longer. So we're hoping once we stretch this thing out, that we kind of stretch out the movement and the population.
sorry, one more question about the bikers. Has there been any movement on like ordinances to like allow police, if they see someone being unsafe, to
Oh, they
give them a
can
warning
do
or
it
give them
now.
a ticket or something?
I don't know the exact ordinance number, I can't cite that, but they will stop people and say, you need to slow down, this isn't safe. They can do that now.
Okay.
And part of how we do a lot of this stuff, which I was going to get into, but I might as well say it now. Maintenance and the ability to police the Beltline. is all because the Parks Department leases the Beltline. It's a privately owned corridor, which a lot of people don't know. So we couldn't get the cops out there to, cite somebody for not picking up after their dog, unless it was leased by the city. And the maintenance right now for the Arboretum, for the meadow, is all done by Trees Atlanta. Any other trash, graffiti is all done by our dedicated parks crew. We have one crew for all of our parks and trails, and we're trying to figure this out, how this works. But for right now, we have a crew of about 5 people from the Parks Department that do all of our parks and our trail. And we cannot use any of our TAD money, so any of our funding, none of it can go to maintenance. That's somehow in the legislature that was built into the TAD for the Beltline. And trying to raise money for maintenance is a very hard thing to do, because maintenance it's not sexy. You can't go out to some multi-millionaire and say, do you want to buy me a lawnmower? We'll put your name on the side. It's very difficult to do. So we're coming up with creative ways with help of Trees Atlanta to figure out how to keep maintaining these things. And that is in addition to how the Parks Department does it. So this is just another one of our typologies. And we have all stainless steel railings and fixtures because they last longer and they're easy to remove graffiti off. And this was one of our renderings. This is Highland Ridge, and the trail looks pretty dead on. And this is what it'll look like with transit coming through. And these are the catenary electrical lines that are kind of ghosted in above. And everywhere that we connect to another street, we have resolved to do a ramp. If we have the money, we will do stairs. Ramps are universal. We can do, if you're in a wheelchair, if you have your bike that you're walking, if you have a stroller, you can use the ramp. The stairs, I love putting in stairs because they're great for exercising, running up and down stairs. But for the majority of the population, especially the bikers, it's way easier to just put in a rail for us. I say that, but ramps are pretty dangerous.
So the rail you're going to have, it's going to be two rails.
Yep.
So you're going to have
In
a
most
train going
places-
clockwise and another one counterclockwise.
Yes, in those places where we can fit 2 rails, we will. In some areas where we're trying to keep a bridge, a historic bridge, or we just don't have the room, we'll go to a timing system of a 1 rail. It will work. We're still trying to get all of our transit staff focused in on how this timing system is going to work. It's easy and then it's not easy, especially when you're implementing this in pieces. But for the most part, the East Side Trail, we planted all of our trees and everything out of the way of where transit will be. We know where it's going on our built trails. We know which walls we're going to have to add when we go in and build the trail out. So really with transit, when we get the money to build the system, we will be able to just go into a lot of these areas, not every single area, but a lot of these areas, and put the rail in, put the catenary system in. We know where the walls are going to go, so we don't have this huge task of redesigning an area that's already been designed.
Where is the specific portion of it? Over Ponce? Is there it's only that little bridge?
There'll be another bridge.
They're gonna add
Yeah.
another bridge
We've
there.
already, and then we'll pull from the typologies for the transit bridge.
Okay.
So you're not starting from scratch, which is extremely helpful in getting these things out in a timely way.
So while we're building these stretches of East Side Trail, which transit can't be put in pieces like that, can it?
It can. It would go, let's say, from 10th and Monroe to, Reynoldstown. It can be put in a piece like that. There's a lot. We have a tunnel involved in that one, but that's just an example. One of the reasons we always get questions of, well, if you had the money, would you build transit next to the East Side Trail? Well, no, because it would just do this all day, 2 miles, it's ridiculous. But when we get larger expanses, larger than 2 miles, then yes. And the strategic implementation plan kind of covers which sections will go first for right now. If we get a federal grant saying, we want this on the west side, then we're gonna go to the west side.
But the transit, is it thought of as being?
Yep. It's a
Circle.
It's a circle, but the way we're gonna have to implement it, it will not all be done at once. So we have a staff of about 6 transit engineers on our actual staff, not contracted out. Most of them have worked in Portland, Seattle, London, and we're gonna have to creatively find a way to implement transit and make it so people will ride it to get to places, even when it's not a circle. And one of the ways that we're doing that is looking at not only the corridor, but the crosstown connections going before some of the circles completed.
One would need to connect to the downtown part of this, or even if it was the East Side Trail, it would need to connect to the downtown part because of the maintenance facility and everything that's there.
We'll have our own maintenance facilities, and that's a debate that we're having right now is, do we connect there first because they do already have a maintenance facility and we're using the same exact trains and everything. So those are things that are in play right now. We're really just sitting back and waiting for the streetcar from downtown to come online
See how it
and
works.
really observe how it works. So real quick, other elements, people might ask you what parks we've opened so far. Boulevard Crossing is our first park. Nobody really knows about it. It's 2 soccer fields in southeast Atlanta, or really the southern crescent.
Is that where they had the fire from
Nope, that's
the
Stanton.
storage methane?
No, that's our next part that I'll get to. But Boulevard Crossing is planned to be one of our larger parks on the Beltline, and we were able to install 2 organically maintained soccer fields. All of our landscaping, for the most part, is organic. There are some things that we cannot do organically because the industry just hasn't caught up with it. But these fields are really in the middle of not that much, and they are used on a daily, nightly, weekend basis, and they're over-programmed by soccer leagues and are wildly popular. I never thought this would occur. We built one for a rugby field, but it's used for Little League soccer now. And then Stanton Park, this is the park where, it was an existing park, City of Atlanta Park, where a little girl was going down a slide. A spark was created because so much methane gas was coming from the ground from an unregulated landfill. And she severely burned her hands, her arms. She lived, but the Parks Department came in, asked the Beltline, this is one of the areas of the park, but you can see up here, this ridge line is future Beltline Trail. So they asked the Beltline to design a new park. It's south of Turner Field, and is actually I think one of the best parks in the city. We've got a splash pad, we've got some really cool playgrounds, and this is a solar PV array. I'd highly suggest just going out there and checking it out. And then Fourth Ward Park, which you guys will actually, when you're giving tours, you will connect to this via the gateway, which is under construction now. I don't know, do you guys have anybody coming in talking about Fourth Ward?
I'm trying to connect it with our Ponce City Market tour, and maybe, I haven't reached out to Kevin yet, but maybe do a little bit.
He loves talking about this park.
Do you know anything about the different massive apartments or the Massive
Massive apartments.
I know that we mentioned the affordable housing, but those don't strike me as like affordable.
They are definitely not affordable housing for a studio. I'll talk about affordable housing. I've got another slide,
Okay.
but I don't know if some of them, sometimes we'll broker deals with a lot of these apartments and say, can you reserve 10% for affordable housing? These are apartments, so they're lease. And that's kind of tricky to do sometimes, but I don't know if we've succeeded with Emily around there, but we are in talks with a couple others to do that.
They're
But
beautiful, but they look
there are
pricey.
so many of them, and they've totally changed how the park is.
That
And-
22% might be more believable.
Exactly. It's pretty incredible how it's changed from when, I mean, that was the only one that existed when this park was built. And
That
it-
one that's just now open,
Mhm.
North Avenue is our building.
Mhm.
It really crowds that entrance.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be a much better
Yep.
vista.
And we try to control those things through our overlay district zoning codes. And we usually get to review anything that is proposed for the Beltline or near the corridor. Our design team reviews, but we're constricted to zoning. And if zoning allows it, then we can request that it not be done. But at the end of the day, it's up to the planning department of the city of Atlanta. We can really propose stuff, but as far as control, we're trying to implement other planning mechanisms to where we have more control of what goes in, but it's a long road dealing with zoning.
I think they want people to move in, obviously.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
for the
yeah.
tag,
Yeah,
but the type of development,
yeah.
and what it looks like and what that means for trail users is important to us as far as, a lot of these things, for me as a designer in 10 years, they're gonna be redone, or they're gonna have a new facade on them. And I'd rather see something, that stays, but we'll see how it goes. Right now, Fourth Ward is a hot spot for anybody who wants to lease a studio apartment. So they're building accordingly.
So I think they're ugly.
Oh, I call them land gaps. Some of them are really nice, and some of them are really well built. But then some of them,
It's just so massive.
they're huge. But the park has really, Fourth Ward Park has really spurred on that development, and that's what we see all around the Beltline. I'll get more into how we're dealing with that through affordable housing later, but it was built, Fourth Ward Park was originally built to deal with the stormwater management issue. It's a stormwater basin that looks really fancy. And skate park, which is right off the trail, was built, the skate park was built for the Tony Hawk Foundation. It's the first public skate park in Atlanta. We're expanding it because it's so popular. Right now, it's a little sad because all the plantings that we put around it have been just massacred. They're gone. So we have a plan and we're going out to bid soon with construction for this.
Are they gonna connect the skate park with the old Fourth Ward Park, I guess?
There's never been any real plans to do it. There was one plan where there's a dedicated trail, but with the single-family homes, I don't think it'll ever be connected to what I call historic Fourth Ward Park proper. So it'll always kind of be a subset,
Okay.
and it's incredibly confusing to most
What about the Georgia Power?
people. Substation.
Yeah, is that anything gonna happen with that?
We have very grand plans to move it,
Yes, that'd be great.
but it's very different. I mean, it's a prime location
Substation
for
kind of
them.
thing. Trucks
So,
Well, the city,
Oh.
you let them above the
and-
street,
Trucks and
oh
like.
yeah.
and they close in on the
Building.
center. Let's tell about that.
Yeah. It's, Georgia Power, they're actually very good partners for the park. They know that it's difficult for them to move, that's the emergency response center, and it needs to be near the center of the city. And it's hard to, they said, if you can find it's 20 acres, or however many acres in the middle of the city, we'll
Right.
move there, no problem. But it's just finding that.
I
And
can
you-
find it, turn a field.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that's a really good idea.
Can you move AT&T there too? They're our neighbors and we're tired of it.
Well, yeah, AT&T is another one where a lot of these utilities pressure. That land's worth a lot more money than it was when they bought it. Georgia Power is a little bit different in that we're trying to find creative design ways to screen off Georgia Power, and they want to be screened off. So I don't want people to see how much copper wire they have in that wall. Make it pretty. We've been messing with their fence for the gateway, and they are not happy. So, real quick, this is the Weston Trail. This was built by the Path Foundation. We're actually connecting to some of it when we build the Weston Trail, which is in this area, starting this summer. And one of the big things that people can't understand, or have trouble understanding, even myself, the Path Foundation has built a lot of these spur trails. We have not as the Beltline entity, but our name and logo are on them. So we're responsible for what they look like indirectly. Tanner Trail is the same way. We're actually going to be using this as the in-corridor trail because in this section of the Beltline, there's still very active rail that is it's very hard to negotiate with CSX and Norfolk Southern of, hey, can you abandon this? Even if we say, we'll pay you this much, there's a huge rail yard up in the west side still, and that's where they need to get to. So we have a plan for how to finagle around that, and this is going to be our in-corridor trail instead of a spur trail.
When you say, that means a trail that you aren't actually on the rail line.
We're not exactly on the rail
Running
line.
around the
We
rail
actually go dead under the rail line. If you've ever been out there, there's a huge train trestle
Yeah.
that is the belt line. But we cannot purchase that, and so we're going under it, and we're finagling around it as best as possible.
Is that west side, around Westview Avenue, is that just temporary?
That's a spur trail. And some of it along White Street, we're actually using as part of our West Side Trail that'll start this summer. Because right now, without the development, this is called Warehouse Row right here. You just back up to brick buildings in a very scary area where there is nobody around you. And I made the assertion that as a small woman who runs, I would not run there by myself. And a lot of people have said the same thing. And so we are actually diverting onto the existing West Side Trail and then coming back in corridor where it's a little bit more open, you have more density around you. And once transit comes in this area where Warehouse Row is and development starts to take off, where we've seen some developments revamping their apartments or their condos, we will put the trail back in corridor. But for right now, just for safety purposes, it's better that we don't. You really do just back up to this huge expanse of about half a mile of brick. It's like a huge brick wall with barbed wire. It's not exactly scenic, so. Back to transit. I've kind of covered it, but this is another rendering of what it will look like. This is kind of near Ponce. It's changed a little bit. Ponce City Market, and how we'll have stairs and ramps coming down. That's not exactly the crossing that we're going with. We'll have to sign, and we don't know how we're dealing with crossings of transit, pedestrians crossing over transit right now. We're really seeing how the downtown streetcar is going to handle it, and how people start to behave in this. It's different from city to city. So how do people behave with streetcars is going to be fascinating, especially driving. So sustainability, everything's organically maintained. There's really no program. This building's like LEED, silver, platinum, something. There are all these programs for buildings to be sustainable, and very few programs for a project like the Beltline. to adhere to and maybe get like a gold or platinum rating for it. So we take pieces of these programs, several different programs, and we try to adhere to those credits. And they deal with stormwater, planting, where we get our materials, how much we're recycling during construction, stuff like that. And wherever we can use solar in our parks, we do, because we found that it is actually extremely effective for the park system and for us. So master planning is a huge part of what we did. We are no longer really in this phase, but it's something to mention. We have, all of these are split up into sub-areas, and each sub-area has a plan. And this is just a rendering, I think this is the Lindbergh one, of what development will look like. And that's how we are amending zoning to adhere to the sub-area master plans that were created probably four or 5 years ago, and we're going back and revamping them if things have changed in the area. Affordable housing. So this is right across the street, Lost at Reynoldstown Crossing. It was a foreclosed on apartment or condo complex that during the recession went up for sale. We purchased it, and through the affordable housing trust that we have, in conjunction with Invest Atlanta, we were able, and we realized that when we build the Beltline, when we build the parks, we saw in Fourth Ward, you know, people are swarming to develop around these areas, and they are charging ridiculous rents. I have effectively priced myself out of the majority of the area on the east side, and as someone who's worked every single day on this, it's really frustrating because it'd be great to live there and it'd be so easy to commute. But we're buying up either areas like this or working with developers to create affordable housing opportunities for, you know, police officers, teachers, firemen, people that, you know, want to live along the Beltline but can't afford to do so, and they work in the city and they want to stay in the city. So we're opening up these opportunities wherever we can, and, you know, hopefully we'll see more of this. This actually has a second phase, Reynoldstown Senior. So we realized that we are having, you know, a lot of the senior population wanting to live on the Beltline, wanting to stay active, wanting to go, you know, ride their bikes, walk, or just get in their car. And so we're trying to create lots of areas for them to do so, and to do so affordably. Art on the Beltline, has anybody been to the Lantern Parade?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It's in the fall. It's our kickoff to Art on the Beltline, which is our program for getting art that is, you submit, you know, your idea or your project to our Art on the Beltline committee, and we choose anywhere from like 100 to 50 artists a year to put their art for sometimes a permanent basis or sometimes a very temporary basis throughout the fall of the year along the trail. This is where we get a lot of our murals from. Some things will stay and become permanent. Some things we will, most of the things that are permanent we purchase for our collection. But a lot of it's temporary, and it's really fun because every year it's different. Every year it changes, and it's a great way to get outside and just walk a lot of the areas of Beltline that aren't developed. And this is Boulevard Crossing Park before we developed any part of it. This camper is still there, but the amount of dumping that takes place on areas of the Beltline is fascinating. We find mattresses and tires and every appliance. I found an entire bedroom set the other day. Cars, you name it. I mean, it's been done.
What's the name of this park?
Boulevard Crossing. Yeah. And it's probably one of our larger parks aside from the West Side Park, which is the quarry or Bellwood Quarry. It's referred to as a ton of different things, and if you you guys take the bus tour, you'll see it. And right now they're filming a couple of things out there. Film a lot.
Horror movies, maybe.
Horror movies, the first, sorry, I do not watch this.
Walking Dead?
Walking Dead is filmed out there, and then, what is the really popular book where there's like a race to live or something?
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, yeah, sorry, I'm so out of touch with that, but,
So
anyway, yeah.
A question, going back earlier, you talked about putting lighting on the east side trail. Is the idea of that so that it's a 24-hour use area, so that you can actually be on the trail 24 hours or late at night?
Yes, and during the winter months when people are commuting and it's completely dark. But we planned this as a dawn to dusk trail. We didn't, really anticipate the numbers at night. We get, from the laser counters, we can see when people are coming and going on the trail, how many people. It doesn't count dogs. People ask that question a lot, unless the dog is really big. But we're getting use at like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 12 at night. During the snowstorm, we got a ton of use at like 9 o'clock when it was pitch black dark. But a lot of it is so that people can feel safe if they're commuting at night. We have a lot of tech students that use it to commute to and from school, and if they stay late, they want to feel safe riding their bike home. And it's safety not only for the trail, but for people that live around the trail as well. It goes pitch black back there, and you're kind of, it's a little eerie. But we've worked on the East Side Trail with a lot of the abutting property owners and the ones that are building now to have at least some spotlighting on the trail. So until we get real poles, they can help. But for right now, there will be no permanent lighting solution we're trying to wrap it into a couple other projects, but I can't really give a definitive answer on what happened.
I heard that, this might just all be a rumor, but I heard that Kroger for a long time murder Kroger wanted to build a connection to the Beltline, but there was like some like the bureaucracy that got in the way, and I just was wondering is that not true?
No,
Okay.
they're actually starting this month or next month.
Okay.
So a lot of it was their murder Kroger on Ponce is revamping their parking lot. We thought they were going to sell because that's prime land right now, but they're staying and they're revamping the store in the parking lot, and they're putting a ramp connection in. So that should be starting soon. We've seen the plans and approved them, so yes.
You spoke about it a little bit with regard to the charm campaign for the bikers, but what other, because a big part of what I'm understanding the Beltline project to be is a mind shift. You're trying to shift people's understanding of how they commute, how they live, and so what part from the charm campaign is the ADI doing? I know we're a part of that,
Yes.
But what other things?
One of the things that right now, our Beltline partnership really deals with, how do you change this whole mindset of people that without, people that have lived a lot in single family homes, how do you get them out on the trail? We're having that problem on the west side. People are afraid to go on the trail. So how do you get them out there? And we've got several programs right now dealing with free fitness classes on the Beltline. There are so many signs right now on the East Side Trail for that. That's starting to change a little bit of the mindset, but I agree with you, we need to do a lot more as far as healthy living. And educating a lot of people either through programs with the Parks Department and through any other outlet, schools even, and teach them, you can ride your bike now. Kids have started to use it. That was probably Kevin Burke, my boss, he's our senior landscape architect. That was his happiest moment when we saw kids walking to Grady High School on the Beltline, like within the second day of it being open. And we're starting to slowly change that, but it's going to take a lot. and it's going to take docent programs. It's going to take, that's why our tours are free. Our bus tours are free to get people starting to think about how they can use something like this. When transit comes in, I think that'll really ramp up how people think about, well, I don't need this second car, I can just jump on the Beltline and take it to work. But it also starts with, people realizing, what is their carbon footprint? Or, how can they use this amenity to be healthier? Or to get to healthy food even. We have, right now, about 4 acres on the southwest for an urban farm. And we're using that as a tool of teaching people about their food and where it comes from. And that you can walk to a farm and get fresh produce if you want to. So it's this whole system that, of education that partnership's really in charge of, but we all play a part in teaching people how the Beltline will help their lives. But once we get into the West Side Trail, it's mostly single-family homes. A lot of people have lived there for generations. Most of the single-family, it's an aging population, and they're nervous about going on the Beltline and walking. So we're starting walking clubs, walking groups, where a member of the Path Force Foundation will walk with them. It's an uphill battle. I will definitely admit that, but we're starting to see progress. And even in just people figuring out themselves how to use it and how to, I can get to work by walking, that's awesome. So, yeah.
Well, an answer to that, in our neighborhood newsletter in Park Advocator back in April or May of last year, one of the kids who goes to Green wrote an article about the Beltline. And he said that he had to wait for his grown sister to put on her makeup and everything, and he always was that close to being late at Grady. And then he realized the Beltline, so he rides his bike, rides the bike to Grady, and he likes to play basketball in Piedmont Park, so he can go over there. Otherwise, he couldn't do it because he had a set time for someone to pick him up and Grady to take him home. And he gets a little refreshed and gets to play basketball and then come home with his leash. And that got on the front page of our newsletter. It's a big distribution, so if a kid can ride his bicycle, everybody else sort of gets on.
We've got a couple programs where if it's, younger kids walking in the middle school or something, they've started programs where either teachers or somebody who works for the school or a parent will volunteer. It's almost like a bus stop, but you're walking. Will volunteer to meet at this one place, walk the Beltline to the middle, and walk back. So a lot of it's people themselves realizing how they can use it. And education is incredibly important, but sometimes people just taking the initiative to figure it out is almost better than they tell their friends, like, hey, I figured this out, you should do this. Or my favorite thing is we have several of these small gyms like CrossFit and Urban Body Fitness and things like that. There's so many people that drive to the gym and live in Inman Park or Virginia Highlands. And the parking lots were always full of these places. And people figured out, well, instead of driving to the gym, I will run there. Or I will take my bike to the gym and get a normal workout.
Or just keep running on the Beltline.
Exactly. It's free.
One of the problems I had, I was very close to it, is I didn't know how to get in on the Beltline. So I'm involved constantly in walking tour. And the guy would go up and walk down the driveway of a business to it. And then that's when I discovered the entrance in Somerset. But it's still not easy. And then somebody, they climb up the hill from Poncelet and all that. And it seems like that's what it needs, is some easier to find.
We're working on signage in the public right of way, like on North Avenue or on Ponds, where it just has a sign, Beltline this way. We're redoing our signage right now, our signage campaign, because we didn't realize how much we would have to add to these signs. And the signs on the East Side Trail they're extremely heavy. We have to completely remove them if we want to add like the no smoking ordinance to them. So we're thinking of a better way to get a signage plan that's in front of these. So that's going to be wrapped into it. We're looking at a digital banner system at entrances that say "Welcome to the Beltline," because a lot of times people will find it and they won't know what it is. You have this little sign here, but you don't exactly know that it's a system of trails and transit and all these things. So we're trying to find ways, instead of putting like a welcome kiosk like you see in the state park, doing kind of creative yet not really intrusive signage to tell people where they are and what it is. But I agree with you, it's very difficult to find sometimes. When I was new, it was hard to find, like, if they go to the Northeast Trail, where is that? We didn't have a sign. We had nothing. So we're slowly, and for right now, we kind of don't want to tell as many people where it is. Because enough people have certainly found it already.
I don't know how they found it. I've seen them walking along the bridge. I saw these people, and I wonder how they got there.
Yeah, one of the things we're working on too is all these historic bridges. When the railroads were there, they would ride on the side of the railroad, like Southern Pacific Railway, or Birmingham. They'd actually tell you where the train's going that's on it, which we're trying to. A lot of these bridges are historic, so we have to be very careful how we deal with it, because we can basically be told, no, you can't do that. But signing on the trails that are going over ponds or Ralph McGill that, hey, this is the Beltline up here. And it also dissuades taggers or graffiti artists, whichever you would like to call them.
Is there any plans to remove that extra bridge at North Avenue?
We're going at North Avenue. We have had several proposals on how to use that. Because we can fit transit and trail on the one bridge that we have. People have come up with kind of like a bridge park system or like a rain garden. So it's in talks of how to use it. Kroger certainly wants it gone because it all drains into their parking lot. But we're trying to figure it out. And we might even use it. We don't know how many tracks we can get. And Ponce City Market is actually building, we call it a podium, but there's a large building coming up right where the bridge is almost. So we're kind of waiting and we're keeping it until then. And then there's another one on Ralph McGill that we will use for transit.
But the one I think it will be for transit.
It's, right now it looks decrepit and it's built of wood. But it's kind of cool, and where it's a huge substructure to the thing, so it should definitely hold the little streetcar. Most of these bridges can hold the streetcar. It's the abutments that cannot. So the structures holding up the bridge have a lot of problems. So we're finding out. We get to explore a lot.
In Singapore, I remember they had a lot of plants, beautiful vines that would come down on the bridges and cross over the bridge. And I know that's a little harder in this climate, but is there any plans to thinking about that where the bridges themselves could be made verdant?
We've had several plans where it's planted as a native bird habitat or pollinating